Comic relief refers to the function by which a character in a story offers momentary relief from the story's tension through use of comedy and lightheartedness. If this phenomenon is centralized repeatedly around one character, they become known as the comic relief character or the gag character. You surely know what I'm talking about. I know for a fact that at least one dude or dudette from your favorite anime or manga popped into your head while I was talking about this. It is a very common trope, and for good reason. To balance out the tension arc of any given story as to both keep the reader invested and maintain the actual value of that tension, a tool like a comic relief character becomes necessary. However, like with any narrative tool, it's easy to simplify it to the point of being reductionist, which is what I believe to be the case with Attack on Titan's generally agreed upon comic relief character, Sasha Blouse, also known as Potato Girl, or, as we call her around these parts, Das Kartoffelmädchen! Sasha is, from the moment she debuts, very clearly a strong candidate for the role of comic relief, as her entry into the story centers around the possession of a potato. She would consequently and continuously distinguish herself through her simple-minded gluttony and straight-faced idiocy, cementing her as the gag gal. And arguably, I'd say the presence of a comic relief character is doubly important in a series like this. Attack on Titan can roughly be separated into two eras, the Edge era and the Grim era. Where exactly the switching point is up to you. I personally think it's when Hannes dies, but the important thing is that both of these eras require comic relief for similar reasons. When everything is edgy, it's easy for that to become boring and kind of obnoxious. So jokers like Sasha are necessary to keep the tone somewhat self-aware and balanced. And when everything is grim, it can become exhausting to hear "shit is fucked" 17 times every episode. So dumbasses like Potato Girl become essential to giving this reader a bit of reprieve, both recharging their emotional energies and allowing the misery that's yet to come to still feel impactful and fresh by contrast. If any one tone dominates a story too much, be it edginess or darkness, it becomes just too much. You become desensitized to it and you become annoyed at it. And comic relief characters are a classic tool to circumvent that. So it is safe to say that she is a comic relief character and an important one at that. But is that all she is? I don't think so, and as I said, I believe reducing her to that is a tad unfair. Sasha is, on a fundamental level, a representation of the common person, of the rando that gets roped into these terrifying events without any innate beliefs, motivations, or talents beyond just surviving. She shares this role with Connie, the second part of the idiot duo, but they focalize different aspects of that representation. Connie is the everyman who finds only suffering in his adventure, his village ravaged, his mother turned, and his sanity and self-worth obliterated, leading to his outbursts later in the story. Sasha, meanwhile, is the everyman who finds empowerment and confidence in this journey. Out of the entire cast, she's the person that arguably suffers the least from the escalating action of the story. In fact, she even gains a sense of positive reinforcement out of her portion of the story, as she saves a young girl's life and reconnects with her dad. While she doesn't thrive in the conditions the story puts her through, obviously, she still manages to get through it relatively unscathed. And more importantly maybe, she goes through it without ever really changing. While the world around our cast collapses and shifts numerous times, over and over again, as the truths they believe to be reality melt away in the torrent of plot revelations, Sasha Blouse remains unflinching in her idiocy and her appetite. And that is a good thing. Again, her character function is fundamentally tied to balancing the plot's tone and feel. So when the story takes us through mindfuck after mindfuck, it is important to have someone who remains largely unaffected. Sasha, in a way, becomes a memento of the early seasons, both in the narrative way and in a meta way, as she reminds us not just of what the story was like, but also about what our experience with that iconic first season was like. No matter what, she was always Potato Girl. And that is exactly why she needed to die. Season 4 and the Marley arc present maybe the biggest upset in the series, with it fully transitioning from horror action schlock into a war drama. It cuts ties with every single aspect that defined the early story beats. Titans become less of an evil force and more of a power system. Raging screams of edginess give way to subdued lamentations, and so on and so forth. Everything changes because it has to. There is simply no space for the remnants of a bygone time in this cruel world. And all that cannot change dies. Sasha's death is sudden, unfair, cruel, and it unmistakably communicates that she, as someone who did not let the cruelty of the story catalyze her into changing, simply cannot exist in this world anymore. It's easy to look at it as gag character dies to make story seem more serious, and fundamentally that is the trope that is being evoked here, but it goes slightly deeper than that. With Sasha, both the cast and the audience lose the last vestige of the comfortable, simple early days, the unchanging memento of a time they and we can never return to. That is why this death hurts so much, despite Sasha not exactly being an incredibly fleshed out character. However, one thing I really like about her character is that what little we do get on her creates what I like to call implicative development. What is shown implies additional characterization without having to be shown in detail. This is a very efficient way of writing, because that way you save the time of having to actually show certain things by just implying them and letting the reader get out of that what they want. We never really get a whole lot about her, but Sasha continuously shows a few consistent traits besides her goofiness, like her excellent hearing, her surprising bouts of confidence, and her occasional tenderness. Again, with just a very light touch, applied continuously, these elements of who Sasha is imply of who she might be when we don't get to see her. But my favorite example of her low-key characterization comes right at the end. As she bleeds out from Gabi's bullet, Sasha begins muttering about food, because of course she would. As her life ebbs away, her final word is meat. Makes sense for her. However, there is a fun little bit of ambiguity here. The Japanese word for meat, which is the language Sasha speaks this word in, and her actual final word is niku. Niku is also homophonous with the first syllable of Nikuro, which is the Japanese pronunciation of Nicolo's name, the Marleyan cook Sasha gets close to during the time skip. The exact nature of their relationship is never explored, and besides some soft implications of romance, it's left to the reader's interpretation what exactly was going on between them. And so, similarly, it is left to your own interpretation whether her final moments were spent fantasizing about food or calling out to the cook and man that was dear to her. Both in character and both kind of heartbreaking. And I think this is what continues to impress me about Attack on Titan, among all the other things, of course. Using only so little, the story manages to gain a lot through sheer placement, implication, and consistency in a way that is just immensely satisfying. No one consciously gave a shit about Sasha, and yet losing her still hurts because of all the tiny tricks Isayama pulls on us in order to get us attached to her and what she represents without us noticing. Small details like her implied romance or friendship or whatever to Nicolo is not a great achievement of writing, but it is a tiny detail that, again, applied gently, lures us into caring. So, all that's left to say is, goodbye, Potato Girl. F. Thank you so much for watching, and of course a special thank you to all our patrons, including Christian Finkbeiner, Fiction Ape, Paradja, Victor Perez, Sini, Zanji1, and Mr. Meander. Take care of yourself, be safe, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.